Okay, the first piece is by Simone Weil, this, I think, very great philosopher who died in 1940, and she wrote this just before she died. And okay, she's a theologian, if you wish, although a very, very heretical one. But it seems to me that no theologian, however heretical, could have written quite like what I'm now going to read before the 1900. And in her case, it's quite interesting because, I mean, one does know that she was very interested in physics. And I mean, and she wrote several essays exactly about quantum physics and comparing what that meant in relation to classical physics. Although it's not here. Okay. It's called Chance. The beings I love are creatures. They were born by chance. My meeting with them was also by chance. They will die. What they think, do, and say is limited and is a mixture of good and evil. I have to know this with all my soul and not love them the less. I have to imitate God, who infinitely loves finite things, in that they are finite things. We want everything which has a value to be eternal. Now everything which has a value is the product of a meeting. Lasts throughout this meeting and ceases when those things which met are separated. That is the central idea of Buddhism, the thought of Heraclitus. It leads straight to God. Meditations on chance, which led to the meeting of my father and mother, is even more salutary than meditation on death. Is there a single thing in me of which the origin is not to be found in that meeting? Only God. And yet again, my thought of God had its origin in that meeting. Stars and blossoming fruit trees, utter permanence and extreme fragility give an equal sense of eternity.
I had a feeling in the poem that the claim was there was no special purpose for the creatures that she loved, other than maybe some sort of removed, abstracted one. Right? Mm-hmm. There wasn't some immediate thing that you could say. In the pre-sort of Darwin period, you could say that these were immediately God's creations and were so innately special, individually special. And I thought she was saying something different, something that it was more random and, well, clearly risky and uncertain, and it wasn't so much to do with the physical world, it was more to do with the, physical world, in my sense of the word physical world, I think it was more to do with the biological world, and the
function of chance in
but that's the
in
theory
that?
of that's evolution, right?
Yes. Yes.
I felt that was a I can understand what you said.
No, but I think it's very interesting what you say.
But also you said that it was a 20th century theme, and she says it herself. It's a constant theme that's been around since the Greeks, in different cultures. She says it also in Buddhist philosophy, that this impermanence of existence and this random mixing of existence, that's been around for a long time. That's not necessarily a 20th century...
No, of course not. And in a certain sense, no. I mean, the whole of philosophy is actually a rejigging of certain questions and assumptions and guesses. I mean, always the same. I mean, and simply they are used differently. So that, I mean, there aren't new themes in philosophy. No, I mean, if I thought that, I mean, it is not really what she is saying. It is the way that she says it, and the almost metaphysical value that she gives to chance.
You're contrasting this with a deterministic outlook on life, and I'm wondering whether that's not just I wouldn't say Eurocentric, but certainly an artifact of a certain time and place, because other societies have developed the concept of chance.
Yes.
And have reflected on it. It may be that this author is just 20th century in opposition to the 19th or 18th century determinism in Europe.
Yes.
What are the sort of philosophical implications of the developments in the 20th century? In a way, you could argue they bring you back closer to God, all right, than what happened earlier on, because they give back the possibility of free will. People say, for instance, the very fact we have probabilities, and I think brings back free will. And previously, in a pretty deterministic universe, we didn't have that.
Yes.
Right? And
yes.
so I think the big break is the Darwinian shift, all right, where humans were brought down, right? The specialness of humans were reduced. And that, just my personal reaction to that is that this is the meaning I take from the poem.
Yes. Yes.
What would have happened? Let's make a Gedanken experiment. No quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics doesn't exist. There's no chance in physics. Could the same text have been written? And I think yes. I agree with John. This has nothing to do with discovery of the importance of chance in physics, in particle interactions, in light. It predates that.
I mean, I'm simply trying in a way, to extend the repercussions of your thinking, but maybe illegitimately and too far, or maybe not, because in fact. Maybe that's why we both agree about it, because I mean this very, very strange thing which is language and the way it is put together is infinitely complex, and you I mean, as soon as anyway you're writing narrative or poetry, as soon as you put more than 4 or 5 sentences together, somewhere a certain conception of the universe influences your choice, and if it's very transparent writing, you can infer those influences.
But I would claim, we were discussing earlier on, right before lunch, how we both believed there was a significant time delay in what we were doing,
yes,
and its practical application, maybe a few hundred years. I think there's also a similar time delay in the modification of language and the modification of the worldview. I don't think this happens instantly.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
My reading of quantum mechanics or all these things that happen in the 20th century is hidden order. Is not actually things becoming less structured, but more structured. They're subtly structured. I mean, ones that half you discover initially. But you see, I'd say there was more order in the world in a funny way than this is being led to believe.
I'm sure you're aware of the anthropic principle,
Yes,
which would lead to the fact that it's not a big surprise that we find all this order. If there were no order, we would simply not be here, or possibly would not be here, to be surprised at the order. There may be nothing behind it. I mean, the fact that you see the order doesn't mean that there is any rationale behind it.
Yeah, it could just be a correlation with our existence.
Well, rationale would be an odd word to use anyway, because it would assume consciousness before being, in a way. And the great problem is that we are being and trying to discover, you know, what conscious, if you like, not even conscious is the wrong word, but what forms of order really.
So what you really want to do is find out how much room there is in the variation of the order, variation of the natural laws or in the constants. You can perform Gedanken experiments, create artificial universes in your mind and vary the parameters, and see by how much the universe would change if certain fundamental constants were different. If the speed of light were different, the strong interaction, coupling constant were different, a lot of different parameters. And you see that actually the range is not very large. There's not that much of variation that you could have.
Before what? Before the universe changes its nature completely?
Yes, yeah. For example, before stars don't form anymore. Star formation, gravitational collapse, these kinds of things require parameters in a certain range, if that is in fact possible.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the universe, if this was an option for the universe, it could change these parameters. You must be much more at home with those ideas than I am.
Well, if I was to say what I believe is the single most profound fact we discovered in the latter half of the 20th century, it's that very, very complex outcomes can be the result of extremely simple rules, of the repetitive application of very, very simple rules. I mean, a simple analogy is that chess is a game, or Go, right? Both games with an immensely varied set of possibilities, actually games, but the basic rules are extremely simple. I think now we come to the conclusion this is possibly what the world is, right? Meaning that people believe that, I think many people have a belief that you can only get very complex results from very complex input. Right? This is just not true. It isn't true at all. Right? And this is a really incredible thing. Right? It may be that, and that's the beauty, actually. That's the extraordinary beauty. You could write down something that's incredibly compact, right? So very easy for you to memorize, to know, but yet could describe everything about nature, or everything about, in principle. Of course, that process of deriving the consequences from this input is just as complicated as understanding the entire world simultaneously. But the very fact it can be implied by these simple rules, I think that's a very profound fact. And there's no reason. The input doesn't have to be as complicated as the output. Why is the world describable? Why is the world of such a nature that you can describe many properties of it in a more compact way than directly experiencing it? Why should it be that you can summarize experience in some way? Right? That ability to compactify, right, to squish down, is remarkable in itself. Aren't you admitting that in her poem she's admitting the existence, the fact that the world is basically uncaring, and you have to almost impose it, all right? You have to work hard to give it meaning.
I don't think she's doing that at all. I think what she's doing, she's looking. I mean, if you look at there are the points where, I mean, the woman who wishes for a child white as snow and red as blood gets it, and then hands it over to a stepmother. It seems to me there are all kinds of what we would know as very kind of cliched ways of describing the world in here, which are being shattered by her seeking to impose a different sense on the world, perhaps a sense of order on the world, but certainly a sense of value. And those, what it seems to me that the poem is saying is that many of the ways we've been talking about the world before now lack value. They no longer contain any value.
Yes,
they're
I agree
shallow,
with you. Yes.
And that's what seems to me that's what we're after.
I agree with that very much.
I still see her trying to find some reason behind the uncaringness, trying to deal with that, not accept it as it is. And this uncaring aspect of the world, that's what science would tell her the world is like. That chance and impermanence are at the heart of it. And certainly not emotional attachment to beauty or to beings. And she's trying to put something on top of this uncaring world to make it more acceptable to herself.
No,
I think
that's the feeling I have.
I mean, long hard look at chance, it seems.
Yeah, and I think, this is unfair to quote other things from her because we haven't read them. But I think that from then, on the contrary, what she was saying is, let me accept this uncaring world, if you wish, because in accepting it, I will find something. In that acceptance, I will find something. Let me imitate God who, through his infinity, loves finite things because they are finite things. And repeatedly she says, It is only when affliction is totally accepted that one begins to see anything beyond. Even though affliction can completely destroy, etc., etc. I mean, always. It's not that she is really putting some kind of icing. I don't think so.
I think it's a very cold, hard look at affliction
yes.
and the sort of ravages of chance.